Shed the light on your shadow. It always follows us around. There is not a person in the entire world who doesn't have this mysterious companion, powerful and invisible, our double, our opponent, with whom each of us should get to know each other better. Hi, my name is Romenska. I'm a love coach, and I would like to tell you today about the concept of Carl Jung, which is an archetype called the shadow. Persona and shadows are terms related to Carl Jung's psychoanalytical theory. Jung describes persona as our conscious personality, which represents our identity and our conscious motives, while shadow is unconscious part of our personality, which consists of unacceptable or rejected aspects of our personality. These aspects may be related to our fears, desires, or ideas that we find unacceptable or unrecognizable. Jung argues that to achieve psychological harmony, it's necessary to work with the shadow by accepting and integrating these aspects into our personality. Carl Gustav Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst, defined the term Jungian persona as a totality of all unresolved and unconscious emotions, thoughts, and desires that cannot be integrated into consciousness. This may include negative emotions and desires that have been repressed because of social and cultural constraints. Jung called this unprocessed material shadow and believes that working with the shadow is an important element of personal growth and spiritual development. In Latin, persona means a mask. In deep psychology, persona is an archetype that represents the mask or role we assume in social life. Persona is an official face we put as a mask for others in society. Shadow is a side of the personality that one is unwilling or hesitant to adhere to. Jung believed that there are also positive elements in the shadow, the creative side, non-conforming side, or culturally radical side of personality. Thus, developing a healthy and whole self means confronting one's own shadow. We must make friends with our shadow and invite the shadow pages into consciousness. So far, this may sound like abstract philosophy or semi-mystical concepts about the human psychological sphere, but Jung concepts often make a little more sense if we are trying to put theory into practice. Most people are in many ways trapped in their identities. We put a lot of effort into looking socially acceptable, and if we have to put in a lot of effort to keep this mask, then we perceive the constant pressure. We may then feel that our social life takes place in a theater scene where we constantly have to play a certain role. Persona, in a sense, is our inaccuracy and self-image which we constantly strive to maintain in order to avoid aspects of ourselves that we would rather not acknowledge. Persona is created when one tries to deny or evade one's own inclinations, such as anger, envy, erotic impulses, joy, hostility, courage, aggression, motivation, drive, interest, and so on. Why are we pushing out the ugly part? These are the games of our ego. Our ego strives for the ideal. It doesn't allow the thought that something is wrong with us, that we are not perfect. This is why we fall into this ideal I image. Person are rejected and suppressed. This prohibition falls into the shadow tension in us, and we directly feel like we are not actually those people who we pretend to be. Carl Jung said about the shadow that what a person would not want to be, the shadow is. The negative traits of our personality are concentrated in the shadow. In order to adapt, the child needs to get the approval of adults. His survival depends on his progress. So that's why child has the most serious reasons to meet the expectations of the parents. So here comes the process of forming shadow. Education is like being a gardener. Some qualities are cultivated and some are cut off like unnecessary branches of a tree. In the understanding of parents, their main task is to help the child in social adaptation, so that in the future he becomes a respectable member of society. For example, parents say to their child, "You cannot take away toys from other kids." a completely harmless, socially approved model of behavior. So parents absolutely have a right to say it. But it is at this moment when the child has a basic conflict. The child wants to receive the approval of the parents, but also he has a desire to get a toy. He experiences a severe emotional discomfort. He needs to choose what is more important for him. For example, he chooses one and then he begins to suppress the other desire in order to fit the image of a good boy. Thus, the suppressed desire gradually goes into the shadow. Or the work on the subject of the picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Its protagonist keeps the portrait in the attic. It's not he who is aging, but the portrait showing his true nature and character. And he continues to appear in public without wrinkles, young and graceful. He hides behind a newspaper and can easily call names or insult. Behavior depends on the situation. That means that it's an analogy how the shadow develops. Ugly side that Dorian is hiding. He refuses to see ugly part in himself. It's not him. It's just a portrait. Examples of shadow formation. Good kids don't upset their parents. Good girl should study well. Good girls don't dress up sexy. Real boys don't cry. Good mother should sacrifice her life for her kids. And so on. The child ceases to be free in its manifestations. Appropriate behavior is determined by the parents, and if he wants to feel loved and get approved, he has to do the right thing. Thus, an ideal I image or person is formed in it. When we understand what others want from us, we learn to show the good qualities and hide the bad ones. With age, a person learns from more and more to suppress his desires and qualities that don't correspond to the ideal I image. As a result, his shadow becomes denser and more often begins to manifest itself. Exercise. Write down a list of 3 people who annoy you. Opposite age, write down the qualities that annoy you in this person. Of course, our shadow is much larger than what could be done with this exercise. This is a simple tool for yourself at any time convenience to do and achieve. I had a client. He was annoyed and triggered by anyone who had a competitive quality in himself. So competition is in his shadow. When I asked him what exactly triggers him about competitive people, he said, because the only purpose of competition is to hurt others once they win. That is what is called cognitive distortion, generalization. Not all people have a purpose competing to hurt others. It can be self-growth, personal challenge, supporting your country or your team, or proving you can do this for somebody. But here is the main point. My client didn't accept in himself and others being competitive. So here is what happens once he doesn't accept competitive trait in himself. In our shadow, we have the most potential, unreleased, unleashed energy, and he could have achieved more, allowing himself to participate in games or competition just to improve himself or win something. He would not allow himself to compete for a bigger position at his work exactly because his trait is suppressed not to compete. To win doesn't necessarily mean to hurt others. How does shadow work? The more perfect person is on the outside, the more demons he has inside. That is a quote from Sigmund Freud. To begin with, you need to learn to capture and interpret the signals that our shadow sends. Shadow and light are 2 polarities to one eye. The more one of the polarities is expressed, the more the other is repressed in the shadow. For example, the more a person cultivates and develops energy, the more he denies and shadows his apathy. And the more apathy is driven into the shadow, the stronger it affects the person. To reduce the level of irritation and anger, you need to accept and integrate your shadow. So many repressed polarities that person is no longer able to cope with it. Often these repressed polarities come out under the influence of alcohol or drugs. In the state, the control of the ego falls and long suppressed desires come out. Alcohol acts as a kind of switch between the world of shadow and the world of light, manifestation of not integrated shadow. Constant condemnation of others and the desire to remake them. Frequently stay in fear, irritation, shame, and other negative feelings. A lot of self-condemnation, guilt, and rejection of their qualities and traits. Too rigid fixation on his point of view. Lack of flexibility and ease in dealing with people. Low energy and ability to experience joy. Many personal restrictions, standards, and dogmas. So to reduce the level of irritation, you need to accept this part in yourself. This part, however, you don't like, is much of it is you. By accepting this part, you will become more whole and emotionally healthy. This doesn't mean that you will always act from this part, but you will choose in case if you want to act on it. By giving yourself the right to act in this way, you will automatically allow other people to have this right. The internal emotional stress falls, your irritability is reduced. Thanks to acceptance of your shadow, you are freed from the illusion that the world should always be comfortable and the task of other people to please you in everything and meet your expectations. This is one of the hardest parts of the job in anger management. You accept parts of yourself with which you have been in conflict for a long time. Now, these parts don't pose a threat to you, as they no longer accumulate in you. You legalized their presence in you. So, wrapping it up, please try to see what is in your shadow, what you are hiding from yourself, because it's a big part of you. Once you unite with that part, once you accept it, once you connect with this part, once you allow yourself to have it, your life will dramatically change because other people with those traits will no longer irritate you.